Death was supposed to be the end. Turns out, it was just the beginning of humans being absolutely unhinged. Mummified body parts posed for political statements. Medieval cyborgs with knife hands. A socialite buried behind the wheel of her Ferrari. Ancient warriors smoking weed from solid gold bongs. These are 33 of the strangest things ever pulled out of graves around the world. Some will make you laugh. A few might ruin your sleep. 1. Let's start with the boy king himself, Tutankhamun, and one of the strangest details about his mummy that most people never hear about. When archaeologists examined the young pharaoh, they discovered he had been embalmed in a very specific, very intentional state of, let's say, masculine excitement. Pointed straight out at a 90-degree angle. And no, this wasn't some bizarre accident or a mummification malfunction. This was a deliberate political and religious statement. See, Tut's father, Akhenaten, had basically tried to cancel all the old Egyptian gods and replace them with one sun deity. Total religious revolution. When Tut took over, his handlers wanted to show Egypt that the old ways were back, baby. So they mummified him to resemble Osiris, the god of the underworld, who was always depicted in this exact physical state as a symbol of rebirth and fertility. Tut's body was literally propaganda wrapped in linen. Even in death, he was making a point. 2. Frederick Bauer spent years of his life perfecting the iconic hyperbolic paraboloid shape of the Pringles chip and its distinctive cylindrical can. He was so proud of this achievement that when he died in 2008, his last wish was to become one with his creation. His family honored this request by cremating him and placing a portion of his ashes inside an original flavor Pringles can. His children stood in the grocery store aisle debating which flavor to use. Cheddar, sour cream, and onion? They went with the classic. The can was buried alongside a traditional urn containing the rest of his ashes. So somewhere in Cincinnati, the inventor of Pringles is spending eternity inside his own invention. Once you pop, apparently you really cannot stop. 3. In 2009, archaeologists digging through a mass plague grave in Venice found a skeleton that made them stop cold. It was a woman from the 16th century, and someone had jammed a brick directly into her mouth before burial. This was not random cruelty. This was vampire prevention. During plague outbreaks, bodies decomposed at different rates, and sometimes gas buildup would force blood-like fluid out of the mouth. Gravediggers who reopened mass graves saw this and panicked, convinced these corpses were undead creatures feeding on other bodies to survive. Their solution was beautifully medieval. Shove a brick in there to stop the chewing. This woman is now officially known as the Vampire of Venice, and she represents one of the earliest pieces of forensic evidence of vampire belief in European history. 4. Frank Sinatra knew how to make an exit. When Old Blue Eyes died in 1998, his family made sure he went out with style and a backup plan. Inside his casket, they placed a bottle of Jack Daniels, his favorite whiskey, a pack of Camel cigarettes, some Tootsie Rolls, a Zippo lighter, and here's the detail that kills me, a roll of dimes. Why dimes? Because Sinatra grew up in an era of payphones, and he always carried dimes in case he needed to make a call. His family figured, hey, what if heaven has payphones? What if he needs to check in? So they gave him pocket change for the afterlife. The man who sang about doing things his way is now spending eternity with emergency calling funds, just in case the celestial cell service is spotty. 5. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the Mexican general famous for the Alamo, had one of the most dramatic relationships with his own body parts in military history. In 1838, during a battle with French forces, a cannonball shattered his left leg. The leg had to be amputated, and Santa Anna, being absolutely extra about everything, gave that amputated leg a full-state funeral. Military honors, a parade, a proper burial with ceremonies, the leg, just the leg. But here's where it gets wild. Years later, during a political riot in 1844, an angry mob dug up the famous leg and dragged it through the streets of Mexico City, mocking it and eventually destroying it. His leg was buried with more dignity than most humans, then publicly humiliated. Twice the funeral, double the drama. 6. We like to imagine ancient warriors as these serious, noble fighters. The Scythians would like a word. These nomadic warriors from the Central Asian steppes left behind tombs filled with gold, weapons, and evidence of absolutely epic partying. Archaeologists have found elaborate gold vessels in Scythian burial mounds containing residue of opium and cannabis. They weren't just using these substances, they were hotboxing entire tents at funerals, breathing in the fumes as a group ritual. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about this, describing how Scythians would throw cannabis on hot stones inside enclosed spaces and howl with joy from the vapor. These warriors rode into battle probably still buzzed from the last funeral. 2,000 years before modern stoner culture, the Scythians were already way ahead. 7. Timothy Clark Smith had one fear that consumed him: being buried alive. This was Victorian America, and premature burial was a legitimate concern before modern medicine could reliably confirm death. People woke up in coffins. It happened. So when Smith died in 1893, he made sure his grave in Vermont included some insurance. His coffin was placed in a specially designed crypt with a glass window at ground level, looking directly down at his face. A bell was placed in his hand, attached to a string leading above ground. If he woke up, he could ring for help and someone would see him through the window. Today, that window is still there but completely fogged over with condensation. His face is no longer visible. But the grave remains one of the creepiest tourist attractions in New England. 8. Archaeologists in Italy discovered a medieval skeleton that looked like it crawled straight out of an action movie. This man, who lived sometime in the 6th to 8th century, had his right hand amputated, likely as punishment or from injury. But instead of just living with a stump, he apparently strapped a knife blade directly to the arm. The bone showed clear evidence of wear, consistent with a prosthetic being pressed against it repeatedly. He literally had a knife for a hand. And here's the wildest part. His teeth were heavily worn on one side, suggesting he used them to tighten the straps on his blade arm. This guy was walking around medieval Italy as a real-life cyborg, centuries before anyone dreamed of such things. 9. Sandra West was a Beverly Hills socialite who loved two things: luxury and her powder blue 1964 Ferrari 330 America. When she died in 1977, her will contained very specific instructions. She wanted to be buried sitting behind the wheel of that Ferrari, dressed in her favorite lace nightgown. Her brother executed the wish perfectly. The car was placed inside a large box, lowered into a San Antonio cemetery, and covered with concrete to deter car thieves. Yes, they were worried someone might dig up a grave just to steal the Ferrari, which honestly, fair concern. So somewhere in Texas, there's a woman spending eternity in the driver's seat of a $250,000 sports car. She never has to worry about traffic again. 10. The ancient Egyptians were serious about their afterlife snacks. They didn't just mummify humans, they mummified food. Archaeologists have found tombs stacked with mummified beef ribs, duck, goose, and other meats, all carefully preserved and wrapped in linen bandages just like human bodies. Tutankhamun's tomb contained 48 cases of mummified meat. 48. The process was elaborate. The meat was dried, treated with oils and resins, then wrapped and placed in miniature wooden coffins. They even mummified entire joints of beef complete with bones. The Egyptians believed you would get hungry in the afterlife, and they were not about to let Pharaoh starve. Imagine dying and waking up in the next world surrounded by perfectly preserved ancient barbecue. That's actually a pretty solid setup. 11. We think of multi-tools as a modern invention. Swiss Army knives, Leathermans, all that clever compact utility. But the Romans beat us to it by almost 2,000 years. In a grave dating to around 200 AD, archaeologists found an elaborate silver folding tool that would make any modern camper jealous. This thing had a knife blade, a spike for eating snails or shellfish, a spoon, a fork with two tines, a small spatula, and a pick that was probably used as a toothpick. All of it folded into one elegant handle. Someone in ancient Rome was walking around with what was essentially the original pocket multi-tool, ready for any dining situation. And they loved it so much they took it to the grave. Some things are just too useful to leave behind. 12. Frédéric Chopin, the legendary Polish composer, made a deathbed request that sounds like Gothic poetry. He was terrified of being buried alive, so he asked his sister to have his heart removed after death. In 1849, that wish was granted. His body was buried in Paris, but his heart was cut out, preserved in a jar believed to contain cognac, and smuggled back to Poland inside his sister's skirts to avoid customs issues. Today, that heart sits sealed inside a pillar of the Holy Cross Church in Warsaw. During World War II, when the Nazis were destroying the city, a German officer actually protected the relic and personally returned it after the uprising. The heart has been examined once since then, in 2014, by scientists who never opened the jar but confirmed it's still in there, just floating, waiting. 13. Among the treasures wrapped in Tutankhamun's mummy bandages, one dagger stood out to researchers for decades. It was beautifully crafted, perfectly preserved, and made of iron during a Bronze Age civilization that didn't really work with iron yet. The mystery was solved in 2016 when scientists analyzed the blade's composition and found it contained nickel and cobalt in ratios that matched meteorites. This dagger was literally made from metal that fell from space. The Egyptians of that era prized meteoric iron precisely because they knew it came from the heavens. They called it iron from the sky. So Tutankhamun went to meet his gods, carrying a blade forged from the cosmos itself, wrapped against his royal thigh for 3,000 years. Even in death, the kid had style. 14. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall were one of Hollywood's greatest love stories. When Bogart died of cancer in 1957, Bacall placed something small but deeply meaningful in his coffin, a gold whistle. It was inscribed with a reference to their first film together, To Have and Have Not, where Bacall delivered her famous line to Bogart, "You know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow." The inscription on the whistle read, "If you want anything, just whistle." It was their thing, their inside joke, their promise. So the toughest guy in classic cinema went to his grave with a tiny gold whistle, a token of the love that defined his final years. Hollywood tough guys, secretly romantic. 15. Medieval Poland had a vampire problem. Or at least they thought they did. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple burial sites where skeletons were interred with sharp iron sickles placed directly across their throats. The message was brutally clear. If this corpse tries to rise from the dead, it will slice its own head off. Some bodies also had rocks placed on their throats or stakes driven through their pelvises to pin them down. These weren't criminals or outcasts necessarily. Some were buried with coins and goods, suggesting they were respected in life but feared in death. Maybe they died strangely or had visible deformities, or just made people nervous. Whatever the reason, their communities took no chances. Stay down or lose your head. Medieval vampire insurance. 16. The Romans loved gambling. They loved it so much they made it illegal during most of the year, which of course meant everyone did it anyway, just secretly. And some gamblers wanted every possible edge. Archaeologists have found Roman dice that were loaded with lead to favor certain numbers. Not just one or two dice, multiple sets across different sites. These cheaters loved their weighted dice so much they took them to the grave. The implication is beautiful. They plan to keep hustling in the afterlife. Picture it. You die, cross over to wherever Romans believed they were going, and immediately start a crooked dice game with other spirits. Some habits are just too profitable to abandon. Even death can't stop a dedicated con artist. 17. Japanese fishermen in the 19th century used to create something called ningyo, or mermaid mummies, by stitching monkey and fish parts together for sideshows. So when a mummy with a crocodile head attached to a human torso was found in Egypt, everyone assumed it was another fake. It was not. This thing, sometimes called the Screaming Mermaid Mummy, was a legitimate ancient Egyptian religious artifact, possibly a representation of Sobek, the crocodile god, or a ceremonial offering combining sacred animals with human elements. The craftsmanship was ancient and intentional, not some carnival hoax. The Egyptians genuinely made this hybrid creature and mummified it with the same care they gave to pharaohs. Weird religious flex, but okay. The ancient world had a very different relationship with the concept of appropriate burial companions. 18. When Bob Marley died in 1981, his funeral became the largest in Jamaican history, and the items placed in his coffin told the complete story of who he was. His red Gibson, Les Paul guitar, the instrument he played on stages around the world. A Bible open to Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," reflecting his deep Rastafari faith. A ring given to him by the Prince of Ethiopia. A single stalk of marijuana, because of course. And a soccer ball, because the man genuinely loved the sport. His coffin was essentially a time capsule of everything that mattered to him: music, faith, heritage, herb, and football. Marley was buried in a mausoleum in his hometown of 9 Mile, Jamaica, where people still make pilgrimages to pay respects to the legend who sang about one love. 19. In 2019, archaeologists opened an 800-year-old well tomb in London and found something that defied explanation. A medieval man had been buried wearing elaborate thigh-high leather boots. Over the centuries, his entire body had completely dissolved. His bones turned to dust. Even his clothing vanished. But somehow, impossibly, those leather boots remained perfectly preserved. They were still standing upright in the grave, exactly where his legs used to be. Just 2 tall boots, standing in darkness with nothing left of the man who wore them. Nobody knows exactly why the leather survived when everything else disappeared. The boots are beautifully made, suggesting wealth. And now they exist as the only physical evidence that this person ever lived at all. 2 empty boots, standing guard over nothing. 20. In Iran's burnt city, archaeologists discovered a female skeleton from about 5,000 years ago with something extraordinary in her left eye socket: an artificial eyeball. This prosthetic was made of lightweight material, covered with a thin layer of gold, etched with a pattern radiating from a central circle that represented the iris. Tiny holes drilled on each side held the gold thread that kept it in place. Analysis showed the woman wore this eye during her life, not just in burial. She was tall for her era and may have been a priestess or someone of high status. The fact that she had access to such sophisticated medical technology 5 millennia ago is mind-blowing. Someone in ancient Iran was crafting custom golden eyeballs that people actually wore. The ancient world was far more advanced than we like to admit. 21. The early 19th century had a grave robbing epidemic. Medical schools needed fresh corpses for dissection, demand outpaced legal supply, and a black market for bodies emerged. Body snatchers, also called resurrection men, would wait for funerals to end, then dig up the newly buried and sell them to anatomy schools. Families, understandably, freaked out. Their solution was the mort safe, a heavy iron cage or framework placed over a grave to prevent anyone from digging it up. Some were permanent iron lattices cemented into the ground. Others were borrowed from the cemetery for a few weeks until the body was too decomposed to be valuable. Victorian cemeteries became armor-plated fortresses against theft. Not to keep the dead from rising, but to keep the living from stealing. The corpse trade eventually inspired better body donation laws, but mort safes remain standing in Scottish graveyards to this day. 22. In a 9th century Viking grave in Birka, Sweden, archaeologists found a woman buried with all the typical Norse goods: brooches, beads, and a silver ring. Decades later, when someone finally examined that ring under magnification, they found Arabic Kufic script, engraved on it reading Illallah, meaning for Allah or to Allah. This wasn't loot from a raid. The ring showed almost no wear, suggesting it went from an Islamic silversmith to this Viking woman without much time or many hands in between. It's direct physical evidence that Vikings had personal trade contact with the Islamic world, possibly traveling all the way to Baghdad along river routes. This woman in Sweden owned and cherished a ring invoking Allah. The Viking world was far more connected than any stereotype suggests. 23. We think of cigarettes as a relatively modern invention. The commercial cigarette emerged in the 19th century, but the basic concept? Ancient. At multiple Native American archaeological sites, researchers have found hollow reed tubes with visible tobacco residue inside them. These were essentially prehistoric cigarettes, plant material stuffed into a tube for smoking. The oldest evidence of tobacco use in North America dates back over 3,000 years. Indigenous peoples were rolling and tubing their smokes millennia before Europeans arrived and industrialized the whole thing. These proto-cigarettes were likely ceremonial and sacred, not the casual habit they would become. But the engineering was already there. Hollow tube plus tobacco equals something you can light and inhale. Humans really will invent smoking first. Ask questions later. 24. Harry Houdini was famous for escaping from anything: handcuffs, straitjackets, buried coffins, locked tanks filled with water. But he never escaped the grief of losing his mother. When Cecilia Weiss died in 1913, Houdini was devastated beyond recovery. He spent years trying to contact her through seances and spiritualists, eventually dedicating himself to exposing fraudulent mediums who preyed on grieving people. When Houdini himself died in 1926, his head was placed on a pillow, stuffed with letters his mother had written to him. He wanted to rest on her words forever. The greatest escape artist in history was buried clinging to his mom's correspondence. There was one bond even Houdini couldn't break free from, and he didn't want to. His mother's letters became his eternal pillow. 25. When Vikings and Celts buried their warriors, they often included swords in the graves. But here's the strange part. Many of these swords were deliberately destroyed first. Bent completely in half, twisted like pretzels, broken into pieces. This wasn't vandalism. It was ritual killing. The belief was that by killing the sword, its spirit would be released to accompany the dead warrior into the afterlife. A living sword couldn't cross over. Only a dead one could. There was also a practical bonus. A mangled blade was worthless to grave robbers. Nobody's digging up a burial mound to steal a pretzel-shaped piece of iron. So these warriors went to their final reward armed with ghost swords that only they could use. Smart theology and excellent theft deterrence. 26. In 2008, scientists announced the discovery of a bracelet that shouldn't exist. Found in Denisova Cave in Siberia, this polished green chlorite bangle was crafted by Denisovans, a mysterious human cousin species. The bracelet is about 40,000 years old. And here's the problem. It shows evidence of drilling with a high-rotation tool, creating a perfectly circular hole with precision that supposedly required technology humans wouldn't develop for tens of thousands of years. The surface is polished smooth with techniques we associate with much later periods. Either the Denisovans were far more sophisticated than we imagined, or we fundamentally misunderstand ancient capabilities. This one bracelet, sitting in a Russian museum, quietly challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric technology. 40,000 years old, drilled like it was made yesterday. 27. Ancient Egyptians believed that when you died, your heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at to judge your worthiness. Your heart knew everything you'd done, every lie, every sin. It could testify against you. So naturally, the Egyptians figured out how to bribe their own organs. Heart scarabs were stone beetles placed on the mummy's chest, inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead. The inscription basically said, "O my heart, do not stand as a witness against me. Do not oppose me in the tribunal. Do not be hostile to me in front of the keeper of the balance." They were literally telling their own hearts to keep quiet during judgment. Don't snitch, heart. We're in this together. Even in death, Egyptians were gaming the system. 28. Götz von Berlichingen was a 16th century German knight who lived one of the most metal lives in history. During a siege in 1504, a cannonball shattered his right arm, which had to be amputated. Instead of retiring, Götz commissioned an iron prosthetic hand with articulated fingers that could grip a sword, hold reins, and even write with a quill. He kept fighting for decades with this mechanical hand, becoming legendary. When he died of natural causes in 1562, he was buried with his iron hand still attached. The prosthetic, now in a German museum, is an engineering marvel of springs and gears. Guts became the original Bionic Man, inspiring a play by Goethe and proving that losing a limb was just a temporary setback for a German knight with good metalworkers. 29. Witch bottles are one of the strangest forms of folk magic found in early modern graves and buildings. These were ceramic or glass bottles filled with truly disgusting ingredients: human urine, bent iron pins, nail clippings, hair, thorns, and sometimes small bones. The idea was sympathetic magic. If a witch cursed you, the bottle would draw in the evil magic, trap it with the pins, and use your bodily fluids to confuse the spell. Many were buried at thresholds, under hearths, or in walls to protect homes. Some have been found in graves, placed there to protect the dead from supernatural attack. When modern scientists have opened these bottles, they found exactly what historical records described. 400 years later, that urine still stinks. People literally bottled their pee to fight witches. 30. Among the grave goods of wealthy Etruscans, Phoenicians, and ancient Egyptians, archaeologists keep finding elaborately decorated ostrich eggs. These weren't just tossed in casually. They were carved with intricate geometric patterns, painted with scenes, and sometimes converted into vessels with added metalwork. Ostrich eggs represented rebirth and resurrection in many ancient cultures. The white shell symbolized purity, and the egg itself was a symbol of life emerging from apparent emptiness. Getting ostrich eggs to the Mediterranean required extensive trade networks stretching into Africa. Owning one was a major flex. Decorating one beautifully and burying it with the dead was the ultimate statement of wealth, taste, and hope for renewal. Ancient Easter eggs, essentially, but with much higher stakes. 31. In Iron Age Celtic Britain, certain high-status women were buried with exquisitely crafted bronze mirrors. These weren't simple reflective surfaces. They were elaborate works of art, engraved with swirling abstract patterns on the back and polished to a high shine on the front. The purpose is still debated. Maybe mirrors helped the dead see into the other world. Maybe they protected against evil spirits by reflecting them away. Maybe these women were simply important enough to take their beauty tools into eternity. Or maybe checking your reflection in the afterlife was genuinely considered important. Whatever the reason, these mirror burials represent some of the finest Celtic metalwork ever discovered, buried with women who apparently needed to look good for whatever came next. 32. In 1904, archaeologists excavated a burial mound in Norway and found an entire Viking ship. Inside were the remains of two women buried around 834 AD with absurd amounts of treasure. This was the Oseberg ship burial, and the list of grave goods is staggering. The ship itself, 4 sledges, a cart, beds, chests, tapestries, kitchen equipment, and the remains of 15 horses, 6 dogs, and 2 small cows. The ship was basically a fully furnished floating mansion for the afterlife. One of the women may have been a queen, the other perhaps a servant sacrificed to accompany her. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with intricate wood carvings of animals and patterns. These women were sent off with everything they could possibly need for an eternal luxury cruise across the spirit world. 33. In 2007, near Mantua, Italy, archaeologists uncovered a Neolithic grave containing 2 skeletons locked in an embrace. A man and a woman, arms and legs intertwined, faces turned toward each other, buried together around 6,000 years ago. They were young, probably in their 20s. Nobody knows exactly what happened or why they were buried this way. Did they die together? Were they posed after death? Was this a sacrifice? A double murder? A love story? The lovers of Valdaro, as they're now called, remain together in a museum in the same position they were found. 6,000 years of holding each other. Whatever their story was, whoever they were to each other, they've been frozen in that final hug longer than most civilizations have existed. Thousands of years of burials, and this is what we left behind. Space daggers, bottled hearts, and skeletons holding hands for 6 millennia. Now, a question that actually matters. You die tomorrow. Your family can bury one object with you that future archaeologists will find in 1,000 years. What is it? And what will they think about our civilization when they dig it up? Most honest answer wins. Subscribe if you want more weird history. Like if you learned something cursed today.